Good evening and welcome to Mushing Radio's coverage of the 2018 Iditarod. I'm Alex Stein, joined tonight by Michelle Forto, who is a musher, Robert Forto's wife, the co-captain of their kennel and sort of the power behind the throne, Team Ineka. Michelle, how's it going?
It's going great. It absolutely is going great. It's good to be back on the show.
Yeah, it's always a good thing to have you on with me. It's certainly better than me doing it myself because it's just nicer to have someone to bounce things off of. You are listening to Mushing Radio. We are available live on not so much live. We're available on the internet 24/7 through anywhere you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, anywhere else. Search for Dogworks Radio and subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode. And also we are on KVRF in the Matsu Valley. I forgot to mention as well that, Michelle, you are also the host of the fantastic Dogworks radio show, The Daily Dog, which is, I think of as kind of a bite-size nugget of great information about dogs that's available every day.
Right, and that's pretty much the focus. We try to just give you a little bit more than a commercial, if you will, because a lot of times people don't have time to listen to an entire show about, like, dog care.
Right.
And so we try to shorten it and make it nice and sweet.
Yeah. So we're in an interesting part of the Iditarod for a couple of reasons. There still are, for the leaders, there still are about 350 miles to go. So the leaders are about 2/3 of the way in. The back of the packers are close to halfway. Tom Schoenberg is at mile 413. Tara Ciccatello and Steve Watkins are at mile 428. Halfway is about 450 or so. And then at the front of the pack, we have Nick Pettit and Yor Olsum, who are around mile 630. Mitch Seavey is about 5 miles behind them. And then we've got a big pack about 40 miles back of them. Ray Reddington Jr., Ali Zirkle, Pete Kaiser, Richie Deal, Aaron Burmeister, Jesse Boyer, Travis Beals, Wade Mars, Ramey Smith, and they're all within about 5 or 6 miles. So we've got a pretty good chase pack going on, and it's kind of an interesting way that things are shaking out. It looked for a long time like there was going to be a lot of bunching up at the start, and it still looks like there's probably at least 15 people who, given the right combination of circumstances, could win this race.
It's still anybody's game at this point even. That's a lot of miles, and there's a lot that can happen in those miles. Plus, I believe everyone's taken their 24. Is that correct?
Yeah, everyone has taken their 24, and almost everyone now has taken their mandatory 8 on the Yukon River. So, so it's pretty much evened out for that. There are some mushers in the back of the pack who have not taken their 8s, but in terms of the competitive mushers, I believe the top 30 or so have all taken their mandatory 8s as well.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I think it's anybody's race. I saw the Finnmark Slopen start yesterday briefly, and in comparison to the Iditarod start, it was pitch black dark. A little bit more romantic, but I think that Iditarod is going to really grow and merge and really change into something more 21st century. What do you think?
I hope so. I think that there's, I was going to get into this a little bit later, but let's talk about it now. There was a great article by Danny Seavey, who, of course, is Mitch's son and Dallas's brother and Dan Seavey's grandson. And he's been writing a lot about Iditarod and Iditarod strategy. And he had a long piece, I think today or yesterday, where he was talking about some of the things that are going to need to change with Iditarod. And one of the things that he said is he was comparing it to some other races. and he said that, when you look at Iditarod, that a lot of the race in the past maybe 10 or 20 years, it's been really run by insiders. And because it's been run by insiders, they've sort of acted as if they know what's best for the race, and have just gone ahead and done what they think is best for the race. And that has meant, Danny said, sweeping some things under the rug just because it was easier to deal with them internally than to be more transparent and deal with them in a way that would perhaps expose the Iditarod to criticism. And as we know, this past year there's been just a storm of criticism that's come down on Iditarod, starting with the doping scandal and Dallas Seavey kind of declaring war on the Iditarod board. And it really seemed, and Danny was saying that he wasn't criticizing the way things have been handled as much as criticizing the lack of transparency, and said that a different board that was not used to just doing whatever they wanted to do, but felt that they had to be more accountable and think more about the long-term good of the race, would perhaps have done the same things but explained them differently. What's your take on that?
My take on the summary you just did is that I think I agree with him. Now, Robert probably would have a completely different idea, so I hope you ask him the next time you guys get to talk. But I think that when you have a board that's been together like this board has been together for so long, the end result is survival of the board and what's best for the board sometimes instead of what's best for the whole of the race as a business. And it's less about the mushers and the dogs. And when I first met Robert in 2000, late 1999, I had no idea that Iditarod was even a thing, okay?
Right.
So everything that I have learned about Iditarod for the past 18 years, it has changed so much in just the last 18 years. It is nothing like what the history books talk about. It's nothing like what the forefathers, if you will, sat down and talked about and created. It was a camping trip. It was romantic. It was about camaraderie. It was getting out into the wilderness and still thinking about that heroic feat that occurred and then became the Iditarod. And so I think that they've come away from, and you know that I am a history buff, okay, trying to become a historian. But I think that they've lost the way that was created in the first place. And they're not going to get that back unless they really sit down and listen to not the fans and not the sponsors, but they need to listen to these old timers. They need to listen to the old mushers that have been around for 20 plus years. They need to listen to Dee Dee. They need to listen to Jeff King. They need to listen to Boozer. They need to listen to Mitch and his dad. They need to listen to Barb Reddington. They need to sit down and listen and really, really retool the agenda and the goals of why we're out here doing it. It's not just to prove who's the fastest anymore. The slowest are now doing it in 11 days. Okay? So it's not about, I don't think it's about that anymore. I think that we have lost our connection to the villages in a way that I don't particularly like myself. But I think we've lost the romanticism of it.
Yeah, and that leads me into another thing I wanted to talk about, which is that it was announced that the total prize money that's being split among the finishers this year is $500,000, which sounds like a lot, except that it's down from about $750,000 last year. And so last year the first place winner got $71,000 plus the truck. This year it's only going to be $50,000 plus the truck. And then the second and third and subsequent places are all considerably less. So it's gone down. The money that is being split for the prize money has gone down by about a third, which is an enormous drop, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but let's take it into a little bit of a perspective for people that are listening. $71,000, that's fabulous, okay? That, if you take the truck out of it, let's just call the truck prize money that you're going to end up paying taxes on anyway. But the $71,000 is only, that's $37 an hour, Alex.
Right.
Okay? So through the year, this is not just these people's pastime. This is their livelihood. So through the year, you're going to spend hour upon hour upon hour working with these dogs, training these dogs, keeping them healthy. And keeping them healthy is not just feeding them premium dog food, okay? But $37 an hour is what you're going to earn to showcase the last great race for the United States. And I think that that's pretty sad that people think that, well, one, they think it's not worth it. And two, they think that that's a lot of money. So you either think that's not worth it or you think that's a lot of money. I'm here to tell you as a recreational musher, let's put this in a different light, Alex. As a recreational musher's wife, I split the bill. It cost me almost $3,000 a month to care for 40 sled dogs that run recreationally that we use to take students from University of Alaska Anchorage out to teach them about this wonderful sport and experience life in a different way than using a snow machine or other power machines to get around in Alaska, okay? And a lot of people, I think that they forget that it is a costly thing. It's a choice, though, that we make to spend that kind of money. Just like in NASCAR. You have those guys that are winning the races and paying the premium price for the engines and the tires and the best equipment and the best gasoline. And then you have those guys that are, turning the wrenches themselves and jumping in the car with barely enough gear to protect themselves. It all comes down to what can you afford to pay for. So if the CVs are putting out premium dogs for their races, it's because they have the opportunity to spend the money on them.
Yeah, and we've talked about the cost of training for Iditarod and running a competitive team a lot on this show, but it is really something that once you get down past, I believe it's like 20th place or maybe 25th place, you're considered out of the money, which means that if you finish, you get $1,049, and it already costs and a belt buckle, and it already costs $4,000 or $5,000 to enter the race, plus additional costs for shipping food, some of which is included, but almost everyone ships more food than the minimum. So you're just to enter the Iditarod, not even counting the training going up to the Iditarod, is sometimes $7,000 or $8,000, and then there are additional costs. There's costs of shipping your dogs back from Nome. There's all sorts of things that are not included in that, plus the cost of either having your own kennel and feeding the dogs and taking care of them and the vet bills, or leasing a kennel, leasing somebody else's team from an established kennel. So we're talking about something that is a very, very expensive thing to do. So I'm wondering if you have, anytime you're going to cut out some of the prize money, I would think that that's going to hit, maybe the CVs will be fine and people who are finishing in the top 5 will be okay. But I've got to think that that's going to hit a lot of the middle and back of the pack kind of working class mushers really, really hard.
Well, absolutely. Nick Pettit is a working class musher. Hugh Ness is a working class musher. I know both of them. I know Hugh better than I know Nick, but they're working class mushers. Meredith Mapes, that girl is on the same trails I'm on when we run dirt track for bike touring, and she works her tail off to make it to those races.
Yeah.
That's a working class musher. And yeah, she's ran tours and worked with the CVs and stuff, she's still working just so she can be in this. That's
Yeah.
passion. You
It,
know what I'm
it,
saying? And I'm cheering for her because I've seen her passion. Okay,
yeah.
and and then there's mushers like Allie Zirkle. She gets some dang good sponsors behind her. I would consider her a little bit above a working class musher, but she still has to do her work to make it work. But I mean, that's one way to look at it. Is like you and I have always said. We've always done the whole it's a lot of work. But why are they doing it? They're doing it because not for the money. I can guarantee you that it is
Right.
not for the money. There is, and all those people, the naysayers and the people that don't know anything about this livelihood. I don't even want to call it a sport anymore. It's a livelihood, and it's not about the money because there isn't enough money to be had. Like Danny was talking to me and a few other mushers, he wants to build a barn and start housing his dogs in a barn. Well, that doesn't just cost a couple of $100 to put a barn together. And changing up how we are housing our dogs and changing up all of these things, that's a wonderful idea. But at some point, where's the money coming from, and when do you run out of money? And if you put all of these new contingencies out there about do it this way, do it that way, this will get more negative opinions off of our backs. That's fine. But you're always going to have a musher that wants to do this that can't afford to do it the way that everybody else can, or the top finishers can. Okay, so it's a lifestyle. This is not in it to win it for the money. This is a lifestyle.
Right. The one other story I wanted to mention before we get to our musher of the day is the weather, and specifically, there's a checkpoint between Grayling and Caltag called Eagle River, and the planes were not able to get
Oh, Eagle
into.
Island.
Sorry, Eagle Island. Yes, Eagle
Right.
River is different. And the planes were not able to. You can tell I'm from outside, can't you? The planes were not
That's
able
okay.
to get into Eagle Island to leave the drop bags there. So Eagle Island has been eliminated as a checkpoint where mushers can take their 8-hour Yukon River rest. And I believe the drop bags for Eagle Island were brought to Grayling, which is the checkpoint before it. But what that essentially means is that rather than having between Grayling and Caltag a checkpoint that's about 60 or 65 miles in, and then you go another 60 miles or so, you're having a very, very long period between a long distance between Caltag and Grayling, where I assume people are going to be camping, or maybe they'll use some of the facilities at Eagle Island, but they'll have to bring all of their food and straw and supplies with them from Grayling. So it becomes a little bit more like the Yukon Quest, which has very, very long distances between checkpoints, and maybe not so much of the traditional Iditarod feel where there are just a lot more checkpoints. Do you think that's going to
I
have an effect on how people are running their race?
Of course, absolutely. We were actually talking about that earlier, and I think that they make you carry mandatory gear. This is what Robert and I were talking about with some of these students. And the reason why they make you carry mandatory gear is for exactly these issues. And I understand that Eagle Island has had these issues in the past. And this is where you're going to separate the rookies from the veterans. You're going to separate, if you will, the boys from the men, okay? Because now you're going to have to be self-reliant. You're going to have to be melting snow. You're not going to have water available for you to get your dog's food melted and cooked up and ready. Now you got to melt snow. That takes twice as long, okay? Now you got to be thinking about, well, I'm melting snow to cook for my dogs, and there isn't going to be a hot meal here. What am I eating? Okay? So, Sebastian Snell used to take those Ferrero Rochers. I think I'd be eating those. because
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm taking the time to cook a meal. Now, let me give a little comparison. When Nicole did Junior Iditarod, now this is by no means to downplay what these guys are going to go through out there with this weather. But when Nicole did Junior Iditarod, that's a 150-mile run on the same Iditarod trail, just only 150 miles, okay? They run out 75 miles, and they camp and hold their dogs down for 10 hours. With the juniors, it's always a mandatory 10-hour layover because you just ran your dog 75 miles, and they need to rest, okay? I don't know what the rest run schedule is for everybody else. That's what they make the juniors do. Thinking of it in that perspective, the juniors have to carry all gear on their sled that they need in case they have to camp out between the place they take off and the checkpoint. But the idea is that when they get to the checkpoint, they're camping on their own. Okay, granted, they get hot water, but these guys, we taught Nicole how to do it with no hot water available. She had to learn how to light her stove, melt her snow, melt more snow, cook that meat, feed yourself, okay? She never cooked food for herself. I made her these, we called them Power Pack trail mix bags. They had beef jerky, M&Ms, nuts, dried fruits, those kinds of things in them. So it wasn't just trail mix, your typical peanuts, M&Ms, and raisins. This had jerky in it and peanut butter balls and stuff like that. So a lot of protein, but something that she could munch on while she was doing her dog chores and stuff like that. Because when you're cold or you're tired, you're not hungry. You're past the point of being hungry. And a lot of the rookie mushers are going to experience that on that run, that they're going to be running 120 miles, okay? Their dogs are going to slow down. All of these dogs are used to these checkpoints being, what are they, 50, 65, 70 miles apart? These dogs are used to that. Even if they come in and they only slow down for a moment, let's say, somebody's going to throw them a snack a few miles outside of that checkpoint that they just blasted through. So the dogs have gotten used to running certain amounts of miles and knowing that they're going to get rest and a snack. Doesn't matter how long that rest is or if that's a full meal or just a snack, they've learned that they're running and they're going to take a break. Most of the mushers, I would say, are going to have to make adjustments to their run-rest schedule because now there is not, like, reprieve, okay? For instance, if I'm going to run for 4 hours and rest for 6, where's 4 hours taking me? You see what I'm saying? It's not going to get me to a checkpoint right now.
Right.
Not
right.
Eagle Island. So they're going to make a lot of adjustments there. And this would be really more for something Robert to talk about, but that's why I'm giving you the perspective from Nicole for the Junior Iditarod, because we had to teach her and her dogs how to run for 80 miles without taking a break. So you start, in the fall, you start running 3 miles, 6 miles, 10 miles, so on and so on and so on, until they are able to run 80 to 90 miles. Now, the Iditarod mushers, I'm sure they're pushing their dogs farther and longer than we did our daughter for junior, but that's kind of an idea of how you train to make your dogs run longer distances with less breaks and less idea that they're going to get to stop and take a break.
Right.
Because that's going to, so running that 120 miles is like running half of the distance of a qualifying race.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think it's going to change up. I think it's going to change up the field a lot. Your Yukon Quest veterans are going to be able to take serious advantage of that. That's my opinion on it.
Excellent. Well, let's roll into our musher profile of the day. Today it is Mishi Kono, who is 55 years old. He's from Japan, although he has lived in Alaska for about 25 years. He started mushing around 25 years ago in the 90s, moved to Alaska in 1999 full-time so that he could mush dogs. He started out as a sprint musher, trained with Joey Reddington Jr., leased a team from him, and used that team to win the 1998 North American sprint mushing championships in Fairbanks. He is at the ceremonial start. He carried a gigantic Japanese flag behind him, and his logo is very interesting because it's kind of a stylized version of the Japanese flag. So it's got the big white background with the red circle in the middle, and then it's got kind of a profile of him on back of a sled with the dogs in front of him and the word Mishi on it. He's a huge, huge fan favorite in Japan, has a lot of people from Japan following him, a very, very active Facebook group. I believe he finished all of his qualifiers in 2017. He seems to have run and completed 4 or 5 Iditarod qualifiers in 2017. For a while, he had his own kennel that he used for sprint mushing, eventually got up to about 70 dogs. And then he decided that he was done with sprint mushing for a while, sold all of his dogs, left Alaska temporarily, went to work as a guide in national parks in Montana, Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and various places out west. There's a big industry of foreign tourists who come to the Western United States for guided tours of our national parks, and so he was doing that for the Japanese. Even though he's been in America and in Alaska for many years, his English is not as good as it could be. And he had with him a sort of cheat sheet of Japanese and English translations of terms to use at checkpoints. And I'm told that he actually lost that cheat sheet on the trail. So, he does speak English. He does speak some English, and, certainly in context can get across and communicate things. But I think he's at a bit of a disadvantage with not having that cheat sheet with him. When he came into Nikolai, because he's used to being a sprint musher, he was using a ski pole most of the time when he was on the trail, and would be poling and trying to get his dogs to run faster. His ski pole broke, so he was trying to fix the ski pole while he was taking his 24. But I have to think that he's doing very well. He's a very solid middle of the pack musher. It's his rookie year. When he left Grayling, he was in, I think, 24th place. So he is certainly doing very, very respectfully. And I have to think that having all of that experience as a sprint musher is something that would be very helpful. And I'm not saying it's exactly the same thing. It's certainly a different set of challenges, and as you pointed out, you have to bring a lot more mandatory equipment. In sprint racing, there is depending on the race, there is much less equipment, and in some cases almost no equipment that you're required to have with you. But I have to think that just his experience from being on the runners with dog teams, even though we're talking mostly smaller dog teams, and we're talking certainly dog teams that are going 30 or 40 miles instead of 1,000, that would really be something that would help him and contribute to his success. As I mentioned, he's doing very well, very solid, front of the middle of the pack, if you will, and is in between Grayling and Caltag right now. And certainly, I think it's a very exciting thing when people from different parts of the world come to compete in Iditarod. And I am not sure if there's been another Japanese musher or Japanese-born musher before. I'm not aware of one. So perhaps if there is one, people will tell us about it, and then we can correct that. but it's a very exciting thing, and I know that he has press from Japan who are following him, and people posting in Japanese on his Facebook page. So it's very exciting for me to see the reach of the Iditarod be so international, and to see someone from as far away as Japan coming to Alaska to compete. He is running a team of Ramey Reddington's dogs. So again, with that whole Reddington, historical thing going for him, and in his biography on Iditarod.com, he says that when he was first learning how to mush, Joe Reddington Sr., who was one of the founders of the modern Iditarod, said to him, "You have to run the Iditarod someday." And now finally, more than 20 years later, he's doing that. So it's a very exciting thing, and I'm very, very happy that he's doing well.
What was his name again?
Mishi Kono.
Out of all the years you and I have been covering this together for Robert here and there, I think he's the most interesting guy you've talked about. What
Really?
a life this guy has had. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I haven't read up about any of the mushers. That is probably the most interesting musher profile I've heard you do. That guy sounds like he is a serious outdoorsman. He sounds very interesting, and I mean, I don't think an evening with him would be enough to just listen to his stories. That is a cool story, and it kind of wraps up right into what we were talking about what's missing from the Iditarod is that.
Absolutely, and it all sort of magically comes around, doesn't it?
I know, we're so awesome, Alex.
Indeed, we're running a little bit late, so I'm going to wrap up, and thank you, Michelle, for stepping in for Robert tonight. I want to just reiterate that we absolutely love hearing from our listeners. If you have anything you're confused about, anything that we've gotten wrong, any potential show topics that you would like to suggest, please hit us up on social media. I'm very active on Facebook. I'm at Coldfoot Films on Twitter. Robert is at Robert Forto on Twitter. He's leading an expedition right now, so it might take him a day or two to get back to people, but definitely hit us up. And once again, please, if you like this show, go subscribe, search for us on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. Dogworks Radio. You can also hear these episodes at dogworksradio.com. And for my co-host this evening, stepping in for Robert, Michelle Forto, I'm Alex Stein, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks, Alex.